we don't normally do this when somebody passes away, but for me, and I know for you too, because, just because this guy's films in the 80s just had a really big impact on both of us. We're both big fans of this particular person, and it's no big surprise. And when I mentioned Tiffany Shepard, she was actually briefly engaged to Corey Haim a couple of years ago, who died on March 10th. They don't know exactly what happened, but I'm willing to guess that if it wasn't strictly, overdose, it was something due to all the abuse he had over the years.
Well, if you notice, like this, there's like a common theme between people that overdose, and which is they always have the flu-like symptoms before they die. And that, from what I understand, is because your immune system has been compromised by infection, mostly caused by being suppressed by the drugs that people are taking around that time. And that you hear that with stuff like Brittany Murphy, the way that she died. Michael Jackson had the same type of stuff going on. It all looks right now like that was definitely it.
Yeah. And, even if it was, like I was saying, complications, he had a heart attack or something like that, which could have been the case. 38-year-old guy doesn't just die of a heart attack usually. I mean, there's something that he's done, and that would be the drugs over the years. And I think his problem, from what I understand, was, prescription medication, which is the biggest problem with people around here, for sure. A lot of these pill-pushing doctors and stuff. So, I mean, it's really sad. It's not something we normally talk about on the show, like I was saying. But I felt I sort of felt called that we should talk about this because it's a really sad situation. I mean, I know a lot of people, a lot of the child stars in Hollywood and stuff, usually if they're a big child star, they don't grow out of that. They always end up having some sort of problems. And that was definitely the case with him because what was his last big Hollywood movie that he was in? It had to be in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Well, the last one that he actually carried, or the last one he was in that Crank 2.
I'm talking about the one that he was a star in,
The last one that I think really did any kind of business that anybody would remember would probably be Dream a Little Dream, I'd say.
That was like 89.
Yeah, that was.
So, I mean,
he did the one after that. I think it made some theaters. The one that was like just one of the guys.
Just one of the girls. Yeah,
it was called something else too, though. But it was the same premise where he dresses up like a woman.
I think that was mainly a direct-to-video thing, though.
That was the one that came like right after.
He did a lot of direct-to-video stuff in the early 90s, and then just pretty much fell off the face of the earth until a few years ago. The reality boom that led to the two Coreys, and from what I understand. He was pretty much living in like a low rent apartment with his mom. He didn't have anything. He didn't even have a car or anything. So, I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but I mean, a lot of people that, and I've always thought this, that just, sort of, laugh at somebody smoking pot or doing drugs and stuff like that and saying it's cool and all this shit. I mean, to me, it's not really cool when this guy, he was like a mainstream Hollywood actor, and then, to die the way he did, he didn't have anything. It's sort of sad, really.
Yeah, and he, in a lot of ways, he did choose what happened to him. I mean, for sure, nobody forced him to do any of the stuff that he did, and it's not like he had cancer or something like that where he couldn't. It was in his hands whether or not he got better or not. He just couldn't do it. But the thing is, I hear a lot of people that are saying things like, he deserved to die and he, wasted his life and all this stuff. The thing is, like, we're all going to die eventually. And we've all got it coming in some way or the other. So it really doesn't do anybody any good to belittle the life of somebody else, because who knows what's going to happen to you tomorrow. I mean, you might be in a situation where you're going to need somebody's compassion, and like him, you didn't going to have it.
That's true. I mean, this is a heavy subject for DEADPIT, but the guy's films, we can talk about some of his films, some of my favorite movies, period. I mean, Silver Bullet, Lucas, Lost Boys, License to Drive. I mean, that's just some of my favorite movies, period. You know, that I've seen over and over and over again. And I think people like, you know, you really can't, in my opinion, I wouldn't choose to view him as he was last year. I would choose to see him as he was in those movies. I mean, because the person he became, I think, when he got on whatever, I mean, that probably wasn't the person that he was, you know. I mean, it changes your personality quite a bit, and I think we've both seen this, in the, you know, in the work that we've had and stuff like that around here. I mean, drugs is a big fucking thing around here, and not in a good way. I mean, there's overdoses. There's like almost full pages of just something involved with drugs every day in the newspaper, you know.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, talking about his movies and stuff, I mean, those were the movies that we grew up with. Lucas was, in my opinion, that was probably the best movie as far as his acting that he ever did. Like, I don't think he ever got any better than he did in that role. That was, I mean, he was just amazing in that role. And then, of course, you know, after that, the Lost Boys and License to Drive. Lost Boys is probably one of the best horror films to come out of the 80s, I would say. License to Drive is a great comedy. It's got a great cast. Like, it's one of the ones that had Haim and Feldman in it, and his dad, I think, was Richard Masur, however you pronounce that guy's name.
Right.
And Carol Kane. It was all like a really, really great cast. Silver Bullet, I mean, that was an amazing werewolf film, too. There's not many good werewolf films that I can point to and say that, you know, there's one that I can recommend.
Yeah, that's one that I even sort of like, and I'm not a big werewolf guy at all.
Yeah.
But, you know, like you were saying, I think that people, if you had bad experiences with him is one thing, but I mean, like we were saying, the guy had major issues, and he lost all of the money he had due to drugs and all this stuff. So, I mean, it is partially his fault. Well, it's probably fully his fault, but people make mistakes, and I don't know. I mean, I just thought it was a really sad story, and it sort of bothered me quite a bit, even though I mean, it's not surprising.
Well, yeah, but he in a lot of ways was an icon of our generation. Like, he was kind of the guy. Him and Feldman were kind of like the two guys in the 80s that were like the hip, you know, guys that every kid wanted to be like. Like, you wanted to be in the Goonies, and you wanted to be in, you know, any of those like Lost Boys or anything like that. And it's just like the end of an era in a lot of ways. Like, the shit that happened to the people in the 60s is now happening like to our generation. I mean, all the people that that generation lost in the 60s, is starting to really happen to the actors and musicians and stuff of the 80s. And I think that, unfortunately, this will probably be like a continuing trend for a long time.
But anyway, we just needed to mention that, I guess, real quick before we get started with the show. And it was odd timing that we actually spent the weekend with Tiffany Shepis just last weekend. And
yeah.
Which, it's a little weird. But
I was thinking about that, too. Like, that's the thing. I don't know how close they were. I like to imagine that if they were engaged, that they were, you know, somewhat close. But I don't know how she's taking this. I don't know how she feels about the situation. I know you mentioned that she was on the Joy Behar show, which I did watch that, a little bit of it. But apparently, I mean, this guy he never really was off of this stuff.
Yeah. And he was on multiple medications, and that's just really difficult. I mean, it's difficult to get off this stuff. So anyway, Corey Haim died at the age of 38. So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's liven up a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, that really does make me want to like go crawl into a fucking hole or something. I mean, I don't know what to say. It really is sad on a lot of different levels, and I wish, His mother, I know, went to a lot of conventions with him and was really close and lived with him. I think I wish her the best. I'm sure that this is probably the hardest on her more than anybody else.